The distress beacon pulsed like a dying ember, a faint flicker in the vast cold expanse of Sector Gamma 7. My feathers ruffled with apprehension as the signal painted its desperate plea across the console of our research vessel, the Whisperwind. It was human, humans. Even the word tasted like ash in my beak. Growing up on Rel, nestled amongst the whispering silverwood trees and the soothing melodies of my people, humans were creatures of myth and nightmare, hulking brutes from a death world. They were said to be violent, unpredictable, their touch as deadly as the toxins that laced their home planet's air. "Captain," I chirped, my voice a nervous trill. "Should we respond?" Captain Zia's crest flared, a ripple of crimson across her normally serene blue feathers. "Protocol dictates we assist any vessel in distress, Alara," she said, her voice firm but laced with a tremor I knew mirrored my own fear. "But proceed with caution, maintain a safe distance, and remember your training." Remember your training. Easy for her to say. Our training had consisted mostly of simulations and horror stories passed down through generations of Rel. None of us had ever encountered a human. My talons tightened on the console, the smooth, cool metal, a stark contrast to the frantic beating of my hearts. Yes, Rel have two hearts, and both were threatening to burst from my chest. I adjusted the comm frequency, my breath catching in my throat. "This is the Rel research vessel." "Whisperwind," I chirped, trying to keep my voice steady. "We are responding to your distress signal. Please identify." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that stretched on, punctuated only by the hiss of static and the thrum of the Whisperwind's engines. Then a voice. A human voice. It was rough, like sandpaper, scraping against bark, but underneath the gruffness, there was a tremor, a hint of vulnerability that caught me off guard. "This is Liam," the voice rasped, each word a struggle. "Liam of Earth." Liam of Earth. The name echoed in the quiet hum of the Whisperwind, a stark contrast to the sterile designation of Sector Gamma 7, Earth, a planet shrouded in legend, a place of savage beauty and terrifying danger. And this Liam, this human, was alone, adrift in the unforgiving void. "Liam," I chirped, my voice softer now, some of the fear receding, replaced by a burgeoning curiosity. "What is the nature of your distress?" His reply was a ragged cough, followed by a pained groan that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't the sound of a fearsome predator. It was the sound of suffering. "Engine failure," he managed, his voice fading. "Life support, critical." Captain Zia's crest flared again, this time with a decisive orange. "Alara, prepare the isolation bay. We're bringing him aboard." My heart stuttered. Bringing a human aboard? The protocols were clear. Observe, document, report, not rescue. But Zia was the captain, and her word was law. As I prepped the isolation bay, my talons fumbled with the unfamiliar equipment. We had medical supplies, of course, but they were designed for Rel physiology. Would they even work on a human? What did humans look like up close? Were they truly as monstrous as the legends claimed? The docking process was tense, every creak and groan of the Whisperwind amplified in the silence. Finally, the human ship was secured. Zia, armed with a stun baton and her face a mask of apprehension, led the boarding party. I watched the monitor, my breath catching in my throat as the grainy images flickered to life. The human ship was a mess of twisted metal and sparking wires, and there, slumped against a console, was Liam. He was smaller than I expected, thinner. His skin, pale and clammy, was marred with burns and bruises. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. He looked fragile. Zia approached cautiously, her stun baton raised. But Liam didn't move. He didn't snarl or lunge. He just lay there, utterly still. He looked more like a wounded fledgling than the fearsome predator of Rel legend. With a gentleness that surprised me, Zia and another crew member carefully lifted Liam onto a stretcher. His head lolled back, revealing a face that was, well, it wasn't ugly. Sharp angles and planes, yes, and a strangely hairless head, but his features were delicate, almost. There was a strange beauty in the sharp line of his jaw, the curve of his brow. He was rushed to the isolation bay, and I hurried after, my curiosity battling with my fear. As I watched through the reinforced glass, Zia and the medic, Kalara, worked quickly, their movements efficient but cautious. They attached sensors, administered fluids, their low chirps and trills, a soothing counterpoint to the hiss and beep of the medical equipment. Liam stirred, a low groan escaping his lips. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment they met mine through the glass. They were the color of a stormy sky, a deep, swirling gray that seemed to hold a universe of pain and confusion. Then they closed again, and he slumped back against the pillow. "His vitals are weak," Kalara chirped, her voice laced with concern. "The burns are extensive, and he's suffering from severe dehydration, and his physiology is unusual." "Unusual how?" Zia asked, her crest a worried shade of purple. Kalara tilted her head, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "His cellular structure is dense, and his metabolic rate is incredibly high. Our medications may not be effective." My mind raced. If our medications wouldn't work, what then? We were days away from the nearest starbase. He wouldn't survive the journey. I might be able to help," I chirped, my voice barely a whisper. Zia turned to me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Ilara? How?" "My research," I explained, my feathers fluffing with a nervous energy. "I've been studying ancient Rel texts, pre-spaceflight. There are accounts of healing techniques using natural remedies that might be compatible with his physiology." Zia hesitated, her gaze flickering between me and the unconscious human. Then, with a decisive nod, she chirped, "Do it, Ilara. Do what you can." A strange calm settled over me as I entered the isolation bay. The air thrummed with the quiet hum of medical equipment, and the scent of antiseptic mingled with a faint, metallic tang that I couldn't quite place. It emanated from Liam, a strange, alien scent that both intrigued and unsettled me. He lay still on the medical bed, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Up close, I could see the intricate network of veins beneath his pale skin, the way his muscles twitched with unconscious tremors. He was so different from the hulking brutes of Rel legend. He was delicate, vulnerable. I reached out, my talons hovering over his arm, hesitant to touch. His skin was warm, almost hot, beneath my touch. It felt strangely smooth, yet resilient, like polished stone. With a deep breath, I began to apply the poultice I had prepared, a mixture of crushed herbs and tree sap, following the instructions in the ancient texts. As I worked, I found myself studying him. His face, relaxed in sleep, was no longer frightening. There was a strength in the set of his jaw, a kindness in the curve of his lips. His eyelashes, surprisingly long and dark, cast delicate shadows on his cheeks. He was beautiful. The thought startled me. Beautiful? A human? But as I continued to tend to his wounds, the word echoed in my mind. There was a raw, untamed beauty about him, a strength that shone through his vulnerability. It was a beauty I had never encountered before, a beauty that spoke to something deep within me. Hours passed. I worked tirelessly, applying poultices, adjusting IV drips, monitoring his vitals. Slowly, subtly, Liam began to heal. The fever broke. His breathing deepened. Color returned to his cheeks. As dawn painted the viewport, with hues of rose and gold, Liam stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and this time they focused on me. The stormy gray was clearer now, less clouded with pain. He looked at me, really looked at me, and a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something new, something exciting. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice still rough but stronger. For saving me." I blinked, surprised by the warmth in his voice, the gratitude in his eyes. "You're welcome," I chirped, my voice barely a whisper. He tried to smile, a small, tentative movement of his lips. "You're beautiful," he murmured. My feathers ruffled and my hearts fluttered. No one had ever called me beautiful before. Not like that. Not with such sincerity. His words hung in the air between us, charged with a strange energy that made my feathers tingle. "Beautiful," I echoed, my voice barely audible. Humans, with their strange customs and blunt ways, were known for their unconventional appreciation of aesthetics. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest that vibrated through the medical bed and into my very core. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough, but with a hint of amusement. "Beautiful, like a sunrise on a mountain peak, or the first bloom after a long winter." My hearts thrummed a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No one, not even my own kind, had ever spoken to me like this. Rel courtship rituals were elaborate affairs filled with subtle gestures and intricate songs. This was different. Raw, honest, and strangely captivating. I should inform the captain," I stammered, flustered by the intensity of his gaze, the warmth in his voice. "Wait," he said, his hand reaching out, his fingers brushing against my feathered arm. The touch was electric, sending a jolt through my entire being. "Stay, for a while." I hesitated, my mind warring with my instincts. Protocol dictated I report his awakening, but something in his eyes, a plea masked by a gentle command, held me captive. I settled back into the chair beside his bed, my feathers ruffled with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. We talked, or rather I talked, and he listened. I told him about Rel, about our history, our culture, our love for the whispering silverwood forests, and the star-dusted skies. He listened with an intensity that made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time. He asked questions, his voice a low rumble that sends shivers down my spine. Questions about my research, my hopes, my dreams. Questions no one had ever bothered to ask before. And when he spoke, it was with a quiet strength, a gentle humor that chipped away at the prejudices I had carried with me since childhood. He told me about Earth, about its vibrant oceans and towering mountains, about the resilience of its people, their capacity for love and laughter in the face of adversity. He spoke of his family, his friends, his life before the accident that had left him stranded in this remote corner of the galaxy. As the hours slipped away, the isolation bay felt less like a sterile prison and more like a sanctuary. The hum of the medical equipment became a lullaby, the scent of antiseptic a comforting aroma, and Liam, the fearsome human, became just Liam, a kind, gentle soul with eyes that held the universe and a voice that made my heart sing. The gentle rise and fall of Liam's chest as he slept drew my attention. I found myself captivated by the way the light from the medical scanner danced across his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the curve of his brow. He was still pale, but the feverish flush had subsided, replaced by a healthy warmth. His hand rested on a thin blanket, his fingers slightly curled. I longed to reach out, to trace the lines of his palm, to feel the warmth of his skin against mine. But I hesitated, unsure if such a gesture would be welcome, if it would breach the invisible barrier between our species. As if sensing my thoughts, Liam stirred, his eyes fluttered open, the stormy gray now clear and bright, and a soft smile touched his lips. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice a husky whisper. I couldn't sleep," I chirped, flustered by the warmth in his gaze. It was a lie, of course. I had been captivated by the simple rhythm of his breathing, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with a sincerity that made my feathers ruffle, "for staying." He shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through his injured arm. Without thinking, I reached out, my talons gently brushing against his skin. "Does it hurt?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. "A little," he admitted, his gaze locking with mine. "But it's bearable, especially with you here." My heart fluttered at his words. His gaze was intense, unwavering, and I felt a blush creep up my neck, warming my feathers. I had never felt so seen, so understood. "Alara," he said, my name sounding strangely beautiful on his lips. Can I ask you something?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "Right now." I blinked, surprised by his question. No one had ever asked me that before. "Not really. I'm thinking that you're not at all what I expected," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He chuckled, a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "And what did you expect?" "A monster," I confessed, my gaze dropping to my talons. "A brute, a Deathworlder." He reached out, his fingers gently tilting my chin up so our eyes met. "And what do you see now?" he asked, his voice a caress. I looked into his eyes, those stormy gray depths that seemed to hold the universe, and I saw kindness, strength, vulnerability, and something more, something that made my heart's ache with a longing I couldn't name. I see. Liam, I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. I see. You. The intensity of his gaze held me captive, my breath catching in my throat. The air crackled with an unspoken energy, a silent language that transcended the barriers of our species. In that moment, the sterile confines of the isolation bay faded away, and it was just us. Two souls, connected by an invisible thread, sharing a moment of profound intimacy. Liam's hand remained gently cupping my chin, his touch sending shivers down my spine. His thumb brushed against my cheek, tracing the delicate curve of my bone structure, and a soft gasp escaped my lips. The sensation was both foreign and exhilarating. A gentle fire that ignited a yearning deep within me. Ilara, he whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my very being. You're so beautiful. My feathers ruffled in response to his praise, a blush warming my cheeks. No one had ever looked at me like this, with such raw admiration, such unguarded affection. It was both unsettling and intoxicating, a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to sweep me away. Liam, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. I wanted to say more, to express the strange, unfamiliar feelings that were blossoming within me, but the words seemed to catch in my throat. He leaned closer, his gaze searching mine, as if seeking permission. I held his gaze, my heart's pounding against my ribs, a silent invitation hanging in the air. Slowly, tentatively, he closed the distance between us, his lips brushing against mine in a feather-light touch. The kiss was a revelation. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Rel kisses were brief, ceremonial gestures, a mere formality in our elaborate courtship rituals. This was a firestorm, a symphony of sensations that ignited every nerve ending, every fiber of my being. His lips were warm and soft, moving against mine, with a gentle pressure that sent shivers down my spine. I tasted the faint sweetness of the herbal remedies I had used to heal him, mingled with a uniquely human scent that was both musky and intoxicating. I melted into the kiss, my talons instinctively reaching up to grasp his shoulders, my feathers ruffling against his skin. He deepened the kiss, his arms encircling my waist, pulling me closer, and a soft moan escaped my lips. The world dissolved into a blur of sensations. The hum of the medical equipment faded into the background, replaced by the frantic beating of our hearts, the soft sighs and gasps of our shared breath. It was as if time itself had stopped, leaving only the two of us, suspended in a bubble of pure, unadulterated bliss. The kiss ended slowly, reluctantly, leaving me breathless and trembling. Liam's forehead rested against mine, his breath mingling with my own. His eyes, those stormy gray pools, were filled with a warmth that melted my heart. Wow, he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. That was incredible, I breathed, completing his sentence. My feathers were ruffled, my heart's thrumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had never felt so alive, so connected to another being. A soft chime echoed through the isolation bay, shattering the intimate moment. The medical scanner beeped, its cheerful melody a jarring contrast to the intense emotions swirling within me. Liam chuckled, a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "Looks like someone's eager to get back to exploring the galaxy," he said, his voice laced with amusement. I blushed, realizing that the scanner was indicating his complete recovery. I should inform the captain," I stammered, reluctantly pulling away from his embrace. "Will I see you again?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of vulnerability that tugged at my heartstrings. I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. The reality of our situation crashed down on me. He was a human, a Deathworlder. I was a Rel, a historian, bound by duty and protocol. Our species were worlds apart, both literally and figuratively. "Ilara," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't let fear dictate your choices. Follow your heart." His words resonated deep within me, echoing the whispers of my own desires. I nodded, my gaze locked with his. "I'll try," I promised. With a heavy heart, I left the isolation bay, the scent of antiseptic and Liam's unique human musk clinging to my feathers. The corridor seemed colder, the lights harsher as I made my way to the bridge, the weight of my secret, the forbidden love blossoming within me, pressed down on my shoulders. Captain Zia greeted me with a warm smile, her crest of vibrant blue. "Ilara," she chirped, "how is our patient?" He's made a full recovery, Captain," I reported, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Zia's eyes widened in surprise. "A full recovery? That's remarkable. Kalara said his injuries were quite severe." "Yes, well, he's resilient," I managed, carefully avoiding her gaze. "Indeed," Zia chirped, her voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "Humans are known for their resilience." I shifted uncomfortably, my feathers ruffling. "Captain," I began, my voice barely a whisper, "I need to request a private audience." Zia's crest flickered with curiosity, but she nodded. "Of course, Ilara. My quarters in 10 minutes." I spent those 10 minutes pacing the narrow confines of my cabin, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and apprehension. How could I explain what had happened? How could I confess my feelings for a human, a being my people considered a dangerous predator? When I entered Zia's quarters, the scent of lavender incense calmed my nerves. The captain perched on a low cushion, her feathers sleek and her gaze attentive. "Ilara," she chirped, her voice gentle, "what troubles you?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confession. "Captain," I began, my voice trembling, I have fallen in love with Liam." The silence that followed was deafening. Zia's crest flared a deep crimson, her eyes wide with shock. "Ilara," she finally chirped, her voice laced with disbelief, "do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, Captain," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "I know it's unconventional, but I can't deny what I feel." Zia's gaze softened. "Ilara," she said, her voice filled with concern, "humans are unpredictable, dangerous. Our people have a long history of conflict with them. This could be disastrous." "But he's not like that," I pleaded. "He's kind, gentle, and he saved my life when I was injured during the expedition to Sigma Draconis. He risked his own safety to pull me from the wreckage." Zia's crest flickered with a mix of emotions, surprise, confusion, and a hint of understanding. He saved you? I nodded, recounting the incident on Sigma Draconis, how Liam had shielded me from the collapsing debris, how his quick thinking and strength had prevented my certain death. I didn't report it, I confessed, because I knew how it would look. A human saving a rel. It defied all expectations. Zia remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the intricate patterns woven into the rug beneath her talons. Finally, she looked up, her eyes filled with a newfound clarity. "Ilara," she said, her voice firm but compassionate. "I understand your feelings, but this is bigger than just the two of you. The Rel and humans are on the brink of war. Your relationship, it could have dire consequences." A wave of despair washed over me. Was our love doomed before it even began? Was I destined to choose between my heart and my people? But what if, I chirped, my voice barely a whisper, what if this could be a bridge? What if Liam and I could help our people understand each other, show them that peace is possible? Zia's crest shimmered, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "It's a noble aspiration, Ilara," she said slowly, "but a dangerous one. Are you willing to risk everything for this chance at peace?" I looked into her eyes, my own filled with a newfound determination. "Yes, Captain," I chirped, my voice firm. "I am." Zia held my gaze for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Then we will do this together, Ilara," she said, her voice filled with a surprising warmth. "We will show the galaxy that love, like the whisper wind, can cross even the most formidable barriers." And so began our secret mission. With Zia's help, I continued to meet with Liam, sharing stolen moments in the isolation bay, whispering plans for a future where Rel and humans could coexist in peace. We worked tirelessly, using our combined knowledge and influence to build bridges, to foster understanding, to plant the seeds of hope in the hearts of our people. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, whispers of dissent. But with each small victory, each shared smile, each stolen kiss, our love grew stronger, a beacon of hope in the darkness. And then the day came when Liam was to return to human space. Standing on the docking bay, watching his ship disappear into the vast expanse of stars, I felt a pang of sadness, but it was overshadowed by a sense of purpose. Our journey was far from over, but we had started something extraordinary. Months turned into years. The seeds of peace we had planted began to blossom. Trade routes opened, cultural exchanges flourished, and slowly, grudgingly, the Rel and humans began to see each other not as enemies, but as allies, as friends. One day, a human delegation arrived on Rel, led by a tall, familiar figure, with stormy gray eyes and a warm smile. Liam. He had returned not as a stranded traveler, but as an ambassador of peace. As we stood together, hand in hand, before the assembled council, I knew that our love had changed the course of history. We had defied expectations, challenged prejudices, and shown the galaxy that love, like the whisper wind, could indeed cross even the most formidable barriers. And as Liam leaned down to kiss me, his lips soft and familiar against mine, I knew that this was just the beginning of our story. A story of love, hope, and the boundless potential of the human spirit.